moving on to the last panel discussion of the day, panel discussion number 5. And it is once again on a very interesting subject, which I'm sure all of you audience would love to hear. It is about health tech in fast lane, a win-win scenario for investors and founders. We have seen a lot of international shows like Shark Tank going on across the world, and we have one major aim of such forums that pitchers and investors both get benefits, and there's a win-win scenario so that we move towards a sustainable and affordable healthcare ecosystem. And this panel discussion is going to talk exactly the same, how the technology, how tech industry can create a win-win scenario for both investor and founder, where both parties can benefit from growth and success of this sector. And to invite the very first speaker for this panel discussion number 5, I would like to request Mr. Giridhar, Elets, Chief Executive Officer, Robotic Solutions LLC, to please come on the dais, and he would be moderating this panel. Thank you so much. Can we please welcome Giridhar, Elets, sir, with a big round of applause. He will be moderating the panel. Next, Dr. Anand Govindaluri, Founding Director and CEO of Govin Capital, Singapore. Sir, can you please have you on the stage? Can we welcome Dr. Anand? Next, Dr. Umair, Mehmood, President, WePelicans Prospective. Dr. Umair, if you're here, please join us on stage. Thank you so much for joining in. Dr. Raza Sekhar, Gujju, Regional Head, Cognitivebotics, MENA. Dr. Raja, if you're here, please join us. Thank you so much for coming. And last, Jawad, Jamil, GP and co-founder, Quantum Leap Ventures. Thank you so much, Mr. Jawad. Can you please welcome all the panelists? And this topic, health tech in the fast lane, a win-win scenario for investors and founder. In this panel, we have investor side and founder side both present, and let's hear it straight from them. Over to Mr. Giridhar, Elets, for this moderation.
Good afternoon, everyone. As an introduction, I think in this session, right from the morning, different aspects of health have already been covered at a very good length. So in this session, we'll be just focusing on a win-win for the investor and founder, and all those questions can be directed particularly to these questions. So before we start the session, I would like my esteemed panelists to just quickly introduce themselves so that we can go to the questions straight away.
Good evening to all of you. My name is Anand Govindaluri. I'm a founder and CEO of Govin Capital, a multi-billion-dollar investment company headquartered in Singapore. We have invested in more than 65 early-stage life sciences companies, and of which we have failed in 20 ventures. I think it is important to talk about failures. We have succeeded in 22 ventures, and we have 2 unicorn exits. What we see in a founder is basically the ability to create value. And the value must be incrementally disruptive. And why I say this incrementally disruptive is because a lot of times people talk about disruption, but they don't talk about the kind of value that they bring on the table. And that is one important subject that we focus on. We, of course, look at the strength of the management team, the business model, and the ability to essentially create wealth for shareholders in the long run. We are headquartered in Singapore. Our business interest is across Singapore, US, and India. And one of the reasons why I'm here in Dubai is to explore investment opportunities in healthcare companies in the UAE market. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Anand. That was very insightful. We'll talk about the failures in a while. We are more interested in that bit. But over to the next panelist. Very quick introduction so that we can move on to more exciting points.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Umair Mehmood. I am president of WePelicans Prospective. It is a private equity investment syndicate based in Dubai for about 27 years. And I'm also rector of Behavioral Sciences Research Center.
Very good evening. My name is Dr. Raja. I'm a founder of a company, a startup, Metaphor Technologies, which is in the health tech space, trying to solve small problems in the healthcare sector. I'm also the regional head, MENA region for Cognitivebotics, which is coming up with innovative artificial intelligence-backed learning platform for autistic children. Thank you.
Thank you. The last session, the most difficult one, we'll try to avoid repeating ourselves. I think we've heard many insightful remarks. My name is Jawad. After helming a private equity-owned healthcare firm for the last 13 years and exited that, we have, along with my partner, forayed into venture capital. And health tech is one of the areas of interest for us. Thank you.
That's very nice. So let's start with yourself on the first question. We have advancements like AI. People talked in the morning about ChatGPT 3, 4, and 5, 6, 7 coming along the way. If you could just talk about what are the opportunities that are present for investors.
On the artificial intelligence side, if it is focused on the right problem, just as Dr. Anand highlighted. You yourself are working on an interesting concept, right? That is applied on radiology, MRI, CT assisted, AI assisted solutions. We are looking at, we have a portfolio company out from France that is focused on artificial intelligence in pharma industry space, which is doing a huge amount of work on translational activities that cuts down significant amount of time for drug pipeline deliveries. Obviously, then there are much more business intuitive solutions that are out there that need to be discovered and worked upon.
That's quite insightful. I think that's, we'll develop on those questions along the way. Now, if I could have the next question to Dr. Umair. You talked about, you kind of raised questions on genomics and other areas. Now, if you could just specifically highlight how it could benefit to both investors and founders. You just focus on genomics, focus on those techs that have not been covered yet. We've spoken about telemedicine, that's done and dusted. We've talked about remote consulting, that's also done and dusted. Talk about the more exciting stuff.
Well, I can try. First thing that I want to discuss about how the technology in fast lane and what are the opportunities and where are they and how to tap them. Of course, representing a private equity syndicate, I'm also keenly interested in identifying those opportunities and then making full use of them. But see, for the day we have discussed enough about the role of analytics, artificial intelligence, and the gameplay of data. But what we are looking at purely from the genomics, I'm a student of neurogenomics, data produced and the data consumed. But what data can do more, there is a concept, we call it data cognitivism, in which the data produced is analyzed using, of course, the best analytical skills or the BI, and then it produces some insights, it publishes some meaningful interpretations. Those interpretations are then rated. One of our colleagues was highlighting the importance or the significance of data reliability. So there has to be a rating system. And when the data is rated, then it has to be translated into actionable, commercially viable projects. Those commercially viable projects should then be given access to the capital. That's what we are trying to do here. And then the data produced by those commercially viable projects is then, so this, the circular economy of the data cognitivism is something that interests. Peculiarizing it with the genomics, what do we have on genes? We have data, we have information. There is an explosion, there are loads of information that can help us do whatever we are doing in a much, much better way. For instance, there are three aspects, I wrote them. Precision medicine. we know that there are side effects for certain clinical conditions. We can minimize the onset. We can minimize morbidity. Second area is the predictive medicine. In the predictive medicine, what we can do, for instance, in the previous panel, we were discussing how tech innovation applies to the pharmaceutical industry. So we can have the structure of pathogens cross-matched against the structure of a molecule, right? So in the precision medicine and in the predictive medicine, there is a gameplay. I think that's where there is a sweet spot in the future, and someone like in the audience maybe, or someone who is listening will eventually get to that point. And then is the preventive medicine, the scouting based on, like we had pandemic. There were whistleblowers, we knew it was coming, but what was the coordinated response? So I think again, the enormous amount of data, genomic studies, and combine it all together, integrate, and then we can have a bigger picture, a better picture, and a greater outcome, and we can harvest what I call TechVantage.
Very rightly said. I also want to point out that everything is about getting the right sample from a better subset to improve, the predictability of what's going to happen next. Thank you, Umair, Dr. Umair. It was very insightful. Let's move on to an interesting question to Dr. Raja. What are the major challenges in driving innovation in the health tech? In your view, what could be the strategy to overcome and achieve that win-win between the investor and the founders?
So I'll give you a very brief overview of the challenges. If we look at the two buckets in which we can bring these challenges in, one is from the technology provider side and other one is the healthcare service provider side. Now, technology provider has certain issues to tackle, especially if we categorize the last couple of decades or even before. Pandemic has brought digital health on a fast lane. Now, how this is going to go forward post-pandemic era. Now we are in the post-pandemic era. A lot of organizations have come during the pandemic trying to come up with solutions which will make life of the population and also the healthcare service providers a little bit easy because of all the concerns which are around the COVID-19. Many of these service providers currently are actually facing a lot of issues in terms of they have come up with products which are, I would say, some prematurely structured. The scalability was not factored in. The architecture was not properly looked at. But the need of the hour is to have something which is quickly implementable. So that brought in some of the products, and a lot of products actually went out of the market without us noticing. That is one of the key challenge from the technology provider point of view. The second important thing is how we are structuring the cybersecurity issues and also the data privacy issues when we are putting the product together and how the architecture is being structured. Then the third one is when it comes to B2B and B2C, the technology service providers will also serve business to business and business to directly to the consumer and consumers. Now, I've been using Apple Watch for quite some time. It collects huge amount of data from my end, but what sort of feedback I'm getting? I'm only receiving like how many exercise circles are closed and how much of calories I have burnt in a day, but what sort of realistic feedback which I would like to see. Now we are moving from a patient-centric to patient-led healthcare scenario. Now what is the technology, what is that the technology should bring to the people? What they want, is it being served or not? Then when it comes to the provider, healthcare service provider point of view, the challenges are, I'm sure from morning till now, there are many instances when this phrase was taken that data is gold. Now what happens is when data is gold, you try to store it. You don't give access to anyone. And you think that anyone and everyone who is coming to you to structure a proposition or a solution for a particular problem, they are actually trying to access your data and take it. Now, this is a major concern and it has to be overcome. There has to be a structured way in which we can access de-identified data or or work with the people who are having these kind of large database, whether it is the regulators or the insurance companies or the service providers. So these are some of the key challenges which we have noticed in the recent few years. And I've been fortunate to be on the both sides of the table, on the provider, service provider as a healthcare executive and also as a technology propagation person. So I'm trying to evolve and trying to bridge this gap.
This is really insightful. And just to add to what Dr. Raja said, they say that walking 45 minutes a day reduces your cardiovascular chances by 50%. Now, no matter what data we collect from Samsung, Apple devices, I'm not able to directly correlate with what is being said. And very interestingly, the people who achieve this target are the highest chance for a heart attack or a stroke. So somewhere, the statement and the data collected is not correlating. So it's a good thing that you mentioned.
If you allow, I would like to add just a bit. First of all, I fully agree that we are contributing, enormous amount of data, but we are not getting paid. Someone else is making fortunes out of it. Second, in my opinion, the biggest challenge, I would say, by volume is inertia. The entire model of our healthcare delivery is reactive. So the disease comes first, and then we react to it.
Correct.
The data cognitivism, the concept of data cognitivism, where we are recycling data, where there is a continuous flow of data, and of course the data privacy is there, part of the mechanism, but this recycling of data will enable the species to be a bit more predictive and prevent maybe a next pandemic, God forbid, from happening.
Very well said. As Steve Jobs once said, you can connect the data backwards and not forwards. So what we are doing is we're trying to connect the data backward instead of actually preempting what would happen later. That's interesting. Now to Dr. Anand, I would like to hear your thoughts on, without actually harping on failures, but how can we have positive collaborations? What do we see as challenges and opportunities in this space between investor and founder?
So between investor and founder, essentially we are looking at multiple areas of significant touch points. First and foremost, it is important to understand the founder's mindset. What is the value that the founder is trying to create, and what is the timeline that he is actually taking to express his value creation journey or the path. Because the investors, especially, there are two types of investors, those who are focused on value creation, the other is those who are focused on wealth creation. And we talk about impact, we talk about creating benefits for society, but at the end of the day, what matters is, the bottom line is what is measured everywhere. So striking a fine balance between what the investor wants and what the founder actually wants to achieve through his vision is very core. And that is where we try to strike a balance. At Govin Capital, what we do is, we try to understand whether we can add value to an investor's vision. And I can give some examples. So we have invested in 60 over companies, and some of these companies where we have invested, the first and foremost question we ask is, what is the role that we can play as an investor? What kind of partnerships can we bring on the table? What kind of strategic linkages can we bring on their bid? Then we take a look at internally within our own partner pool of mentors and see whether we do have subject experts in that field. And be it microarrays, be it point of care diagnostics, be it in the field of virtual health, or be it in the field of cancer diagnostics, or the most recent investment that we made is into longevity. And we are speaking about data, analyzing data in post a particular reaction. But this particular company where we invested, it actually changes the behavioral pattern of a human being and incentivizes the human being to generate a score. And that score is what is called as a risk-based predictive score, incentivizing a human being for using data correctly. So multiple aspects. And then of course there is a market creation. So if a particular company is based in Southeast Asia, we try to understand which markets the company could actually expand and how do we create value to those in this new market scenarios. Partnerships play an important role. Without partnerships, it's extremely difficult for us to create value, but partnerships need not be just with investors, it can also be with big companies, it can be with academic institutes, it can be for product creation. I can give one example. So I was in the US evaluating a technology for malarial testing. Malaria is a big pandemic, it's a big problem in Asia and also in Africa. And the treatment regimes for malaria can be quite long. So this particular technology that we were evaluating can detect malaria in about 30 seconds. And the cost for doing that test is few dollars. So, but the technology is very raw. It's in the lab. So we got it to India, we worked with Tatas, and we came up with a very fine product in less than 18 months. Got it approved in the regulatory markets, both in India, Africa, as well as in other markets. And now the product is commercialized and generating revenues. So that is a classic example as to how you evaluate an intellectual property, evaluate a technology, sitting in a remote part in the US, find partners across the globe, to develop the product. So not only we develop the product in collaboration with the Tatas, but then we launched the product not just in India, but in Africa. And in Africa, when we were looking for a partner, we got Vodafone as a partner. And so Vodafone helped us to commercialize across in different parts in Africa. And then eventually, over the course of time, we have found a lot of support from NGOs and other large foundations. So partnership is key and vital for creating value from an investor, from an investor standpoint of view, especially for a founder. And that's how you create value in a founder's vision for his journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Anand. It's always a question that we have to answer. In the founder's mind, it is what's in for me. And investor, how fast can I realize the value? And this tug of war will continue till we achieve something. So that brings us to one interesting question to Mr. Jawad. What is your typical life cycle of, your product development in terms of, say, new tech? And how quickly, in your view, because you're very experienced in this area, that we, realize a typical ROI? Like, what do we see here? Some little statistics will help all of us understand, from your experience.
This will vary from product to product
General.
in the context of scientific development. But generally, when we look at the roadmap, being a co-founder in another firm as well, takes almost 9 months to get your product roadmap MVP minimum right. And by the time you go to market, you keep fine-tuning because your first model is never right. You continue to adapt, you continue to change that based on the market, based on customer feedback, based on challenging your initial assumptions. And by year 2, 18 months or so, you are there with a good product that can then go on to next rounds of financing and then capturing the market share. Probably between 3 to 5 years is where we at early stage look for an exit or liquidation event with later stage investors.
Very nice. I think that's good. Now, this question is going to be to both Dr. Raja and Dr. Umair. And I always had this question for a very long time. If the world only collaborated together, humanity worked together, all the ideas, the thought process can be channelized. Investors can, see better returns. The world becomes a better place. What stops this from happening? Why are we not able to achieve it? AI, Brazil is doing something, India is doing something else, okay, Pakistan is doing something, then US is doing something else. We are all not talking to each other. What is the main problem? How can we coexist as humanity to achieve common goals?
Come to Dubai.
Huh?
Come to Dubai. That's where we have a far better degree of cooperation, like we are right now, from different backgrounds, from different silos, I would say, and we are right here in the melting pot of knowledge. These interactions, really hats off to the organizers of the conference and all that. They reached out to the potential speakers and everywhere. This is going to help more, in my opinion. And there is no other way. A researcher from Mongolia should potentially be collaborating, working together with a clinician from Chile. And there is no better environment that we have here in UAE. There is no better place in Dubai. There is no greater enabling environment, I would say. And thanks to the leadership, and thanks to everyone who is coming to Dubai. So my response: come to Dubai.
Very well said, because in every organization I work, I've seen nationalities for more than at least 100 plus. So it's interesting that you mentioned this. Dr. Raja, can we have your views?
Yes. So primarily why this is not happening is because of the IP of the solution which is being worked upon. Now a lot of time and effort goes into developing this IP, and if it is for a good cause, if it is driven by the governments or WHO or agencies like that, probably this kind of model will work. But when we are looking at monetizing a particular idea or an intellectual property, so that's where it's in a closed circuit for the time it is incubated and when till the time it comes into the market. Now, how can the countries from across the world coordinate in coming up with solutions? This is actually happening in the research areas, especially in the academics, basically, where people from different countries are actually working on innovative aspects and coming up with beautiful publications and articles. And that has to progress to the next level of coordinating to come up with some kind of solutions which will be useful for the population as a whole. So this, I think, is the probable cause.
Beautiful answer. I'm just going to give you one insight because we're doing a lot on the AI space. How AI works. Suppose I train the algorithm on chess, for example. I cannot use that algorithm for checkers. They are different algorithms. So how we solve this problem is actually recalling different algorithms to coexist. And that's what exactly ChatGPT 4 is going to do. So eventually, I mean, the way I see it is once all these researchers are out loose, all these technologies will combine, and then we need to have countries like Dubai leading, possibly bringing everything to into one place, and obviously maybe we will have the solution here. So that's wonderful. In the interest of time, I'm going to open some questions for the audience. The speakers are very, very experienced. So if you have any questions, please, I'm sure the speakers will have the right answers. Yeah, you got it.
So, thanks so much for giving me the opportunity to ask questions for the eminent panelists. My question is to Dr. Anand. In addition to wealth creation that you mentioned as an investor, what are the criteria that you are looking for in companies in order to invest in or to provide fund for them? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think as a life sciences investor, the fundamental basis for investment must be innovation, intellectual property. In the 65 odd companies or 70 companies that I've invested, seldom I have chosen to invest in companies which don't have IP. If they don't have IP, I don't invest. It's as simple as that. Because life sciences is a game of knowledge, innovation. Intellectual property is what needs to be, there is to be a significant barrier to entry. If you're doing something which is a Me Too game, then the Me Too game must be so good that nobody must be able to catch you. And I'll give you an example. When I went to Hyderabad in India, my very first visit after joining, starting the business of venture capital, I was looking at a company in Hyderabad which was manufacturing citalopram. Citalopram is a key ingredient for Celexa. Celexa is a multi-billion-dollar drug. And the innovators were Lundbeck in Europe. So this particular company, they said that they can do the same thing what Lundbeck is doing in less than 6 steps. Whereas Lundbeck was doing the same thing in about 16 steps. So there was a huge difference, value arbitrage. And subsequently, we decided to invest in that company. And the company essentially became one of the most successful unicorn stories for me and my portfolio. So what is the core message? The core message is innovation must be hinged on strong intellectual property. But the management team must also be must have the expertise to monetize the intellectual property. If the intellectual property cannot be monetized, then what's the point? So I had invested in a company called Agilix, which is a spin-off of University of Connecticut. They had 17 million pounds in the bank account, but the founder of the company was stingy. He was miserly. He would not spend money. He had 17 million, still he would not spend money. And we as a board member, we were telling the management team to spend money on the technology for genomics. And he didn't do it. He was working on gene arrays. And by the time the human genome was sequenced, the entire gene array concept essentially, it had no value because it was all in the open database. Nobody would pay money. So investment is all about, identifying the right founder, the right technology with the substantial barrier to entry. And of course, the business plan, business modeling, your ability to scale up the business plan, all those things will play an important role as you go about. I think the success stories, the characteristic features of the behavior of a founder is also very important. Because in life sciences, unlike in IT investment, if you look at some of the exits I've had, my first unicorn, it happened in 8 years of investment. In 8 years, there was a time when the company lost money. They didn't have any money. So we did something at the board level. And we were able to actually raise a lot of money post that restructuring. So you have to go through a lot of resilience, a lot of hard work, a lot of planning. So the company you have to identify board directors who are not just good, but who are great board directors, especially those who can guide you during tough situations, tough market, like the conditions what we are in. The market conditions are extremely tough. And this is the time when you have good board directors, invest in them so that they are able to guide you during the difficult times. Because eventually, that's how a group of people coming together to build the strong company is what is required. Investment is all about having the right kind of people with the right technology at the right time.
I need to elaborate a little bit about this. Let's say we have a company that is willing to provide telepharmacy services here in United Arab Emirates. We know that this is a kind of innovative solution for many of the health problems, but it's not really innovative. There is no kind of IP because people have used this solution in other places, but it was documented to be very helpful in solving patients' problem and in a proactive manner in timely manner, you can prevent certain diseases and certain morbidity and mortality for some patients. So there's no real innovation, but still it can be promising. So what do you think about this as an investor?
Yeah, so there are areas like pharma services, biotech services, where you don't have intellectual property, but you have you're providing value-added services and identifying a problem and identifying the right way to address that particular problem. So that is essentially a market. Like say, for example, the biotech outsourcing or the pharma outsourcing market is close to about $1 trillion market, of which about 10% of that, or 10 to 20% of that, is coming towards Asia, and then that is continuously growing. Because even Asia is investing from being a low-cost center of manufacturing to a low-cost center of innovation. So as Asia continues to grow, the business opportunities will also continue to grow. And then you have to invest in quality. Like if you look at India, the number of pharmaceutical companies in India are quite huge. But then India has made us very distinct mark in having the maximum number of US FDA approved units outside the United States. The highest number of US FDA approved manufacturing units outside the United States is in India. And that is one of the reasons as to why that's a benchmark of quality. So either you must have innovation or you must be excelling in quality.
Thank you very much. Very insightful. Thank you.
That was very well summarized. Any other questions from the participants?
Can I add just a little bit to it? Because we come across similar set of questions, and I have slightly something to add. But I tell you a story. During the pandemic, somebody who was manufacturing ambulances wanted to benefit from the value chain of the pandemic itself. So he decided to invest in something very, very innovative, right? So there was number of projects discussed, number of intellectual properties, everything, mathematics was good, numbers, impact, all the things. But guess what? He ended up investing in hemp, right? So what is the prerequisite? To very simplify things. And we need more of Dr. Anand. You need a very informed dialogue on both sides of the table. You need to understand and identify the niche, and then to very pinpointedly determine or plot the marketability and the scalability of the product or the idea. That will solve the, much of the, or that will provide much of the critical support to the decision making in terms of investment.
May I add something, please? For Dr. Anand again, you had so many failures with some companies, and you had so many success stories in addition to unicorns as well. So what are the predictors of failure, and what are the predictors or determinants of success in both sides?
Failures and success both are commonly determined by only one factor: the vision of a founder, the character of a founder. If a company has failed, it's because of the greed of a founder. It's about the ignorance of the founder. If a company has succeeded, it's because of the character of the founder and the resolution of the founder. So the founder's ability to create value is extremely important. So as an investor today, I stopped evaluating business plans. I only do two things for my living. I read balance sheets and I read people. That's it. And if I like a founder, I will make him rich. And that's what I've been doing it in my life. So I stopped reading all the business plan, the business presentation. It's a waste of time, because you must understand what is going in the mindset of the founder and go deep into his thinking process. And also, it is important, if the founder is genuine, we must step up to actually create value and add value. Like, what kind of people can we bring from the industry to add value? So one of the things that I'm looking at in UAE is, my advice here is, the government must invest in building an ecosystem. Ecosystem is built by people, not by buildings. You have great buildings, but you need to invest in people of all categories. Successful people as well as those who have failed, because when you fail, you actually get to learn more from those failure stories as compared to the successes. And it's the people who will create the value in an ecosystem. So that is what I'm trying to actually assess in this market.
Yes, invest in people. Thank you very much.
Very well.
So talking about people, what I'm seeing as a foreigner is very clear signs of leadership. The leadership is immaculate. It is one of the best leadership. I see the same kind of leadership in Singapore and the leadership that I'm seeing in India. Clear, crystal clear, defined policies at the top. So now you have leadership which is very clear about what priorities they want, and they are pro-citizen. They are citizen pro. They are also extremely focused on creating value for the people and for the country. Now, it has to percolate down. And in percolating down, we need to have people at the middle level, the officers, not just the leaders, but the officers, to ensure that the policies are executed. And those execution happens when it is done in a very efficient manner. So I'll give an example of Singapore. In Singapore during pandemic, the government, the Prime Minister's office, they announced multi-billion-dollar incentives for small and medium enterprises because they were getting affected because of the pandemic. And so, while the big number was announced in the parliament, at the ground level, the banks ensured, and there were multiple agencies, government agencies, that were put in place to ensure that the SME companies were able to get the loans. And the loans were processed in about 30 days, or in some cases even 15 days. So that is the execution power of Singapore that has led to creating a world-class people-led infrastructure. So the future for UAE is PPPP, public-private partnership led by people. So that fourth P is extremely important.
Thank you very much.
Brilliant. I think the aspects were summed quite well. Thank you, Dr. Anand. Any other questions before? I think we've already shot on time.
Yes, we have one more question by Dr. Ismail.
Yes, please. First of all, it's so interesting. My question to Dr. Anand. In terms of what's called electronic prescription systems, we believe there are plenty of issues related to implement it, especially in our region, the Middle East in general. And we believe the lack of standardization among or across different countries in terms of regulations and the digital infrastructure is one of the main challenges. In your opinion, do you think is there solutions that should be taken or considered for any country or for any health system gonna implement similar systems?
So I'm actually currently working on a digital health consortium between France, Singapore, and India. And I think we need to have more countries join such a digital health consortium. Digital health is a very important area, especially because when it comes to electronic health records, the core issue is how do you standardize data that is coming across different systems, different pockets, different strata, different categories of opportunities. And how can it be made relevant to a particular nation? And also that information be shared without misuse in a manner which is relevant for all the parties. So there are three important things that are required. Number one is a particular nation essentially must have very clear artificial intelligence and digital health policy for electronic health records. Second, there must be standardization of data within the country so that that data is essentially openly shared with certain agencies for implementing. Like say, for example, if investors and payers are made to get access to the data, then they can use the data in a manner so that the patient centricity or the patient care management can be improved. And those knowledge sharings can be made through forums with like-minded partners. So the need of the hour is to have more of these public-private partnerships within the country and also within different countries so that the best of the knowledge can come out. Now, it's not that easy because data protection is extremely important and it is sensitive. Now, there are also cybersecurity challenges in data. So bearing this in mind, in my opinion, it will take some more time, before cross-border collaborations will happen in digital health. But till then, consortium model is a way to go about. In a closed door setting, the best practices can be shared. Best practices can be shared based on a particular care management continuum. So like say, for example, we are working on identifying the best practices in mental health. And that is one subject, because elderly care is a big topic in Southeast Asia. 1 in 5 people in Singapore are likely to age faster, and that 1 in 5 is likely to become 1 in 3 by 2050. So it's a serious issue in Southeast Asia. In many countries, aging is a big problem, and aging is going to impact the economic burden of a nation. So what practices do we bring in place to address mental health challenges using the best digital health policies in different countries? So in this case, we are trying to learn the best practices between France, Singapore, and India, and implement it accordingly. I think we should also have like-minded partners from UAE and from Saudi to come forward and be part of that.
Cool. Just one question, just one comment here, and I close it, but very fast. Can we take best practices from countries like Japan, where they have a very large aged population, for example, and then implement those best practices to countries like what you said, to bring up the ratio? Anyway, food for thought. I don't want, this could be another subject by itself. But I think, thank you. I'm quite fortunate to be part of this August panelist, and I learned a lot today. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.